welcome back. This week we are looking at SVG files, so scalable vector graphic files. There is lots of information on eCentennial about what they are exactly and how they're different from raster files like JPEGs and PNGs. But basically they are vector files similar to Illustrator files or EPS files, but they will work on the web. So they don't pixelate, they don't have resolution the way that those raster file types do, which is great in the sense that they can be enlarged indefinitely. But unlike Illustrator files and EPS files, you can use them on web pages. So today we'll be looking at how we actually place them on our web pages, because there's two different ways that we can, and we'll look at both of them right now. Share my screen. So on eCentennial, you'll find a file called SVG exercise files. That's all we're going to need for this week. Let's unzip that. And in there, there's a Illustrator file, SVG logo.ai. There's also a folder that's called your_name_SVG. And in that is what appears to be a basic website. So we have an images folder, which is currently empty, a styles folder with a CSS document, and an HTML file. Right off the bat, I'm going to rename this folder with my name, _SVG, because this will be what I would zip and submit as this week's assignment. I'm going to open that HTML file in Visual Studio or whatever text editor you prefer to use. And let's take a quick look here. It's a pretty basic web page. Typo there. It's got all the basic framework is already here. So it's got a title, description, it's loading the style sheet. 2 points to note. In the first div with the ID logo, there's a coded out part saying place your SVG file here. And then later in the div with the ID banner, so it commented out text place SVG banner code here. So this is where we're going to be placing our two SVG files or SVG content. We're going to place it in two different ways though. The first way is very similar to how we place other images like PNGs and JPEGs. I'm going to return back to that folder. First, we need to, so we're going to place a logo. Actually, while I'm here, I'm going to double click that and we'll open the HTML so we can see what it looks like. We're going to be putting a logo up here as an SVG, and then we're going to put a banner in above the text. So the first thing we need to do, the logo is what we're going to place first. And we're going to place it the way we place an image, but it will be an SVG image. And first thing that we need to do is create that SVG. So returning to my folder here, I have SVG_logo AI. So that is a Illustrator file. I'm going to double click and open that. So it's a small logo on a large artboard. We could export this file as is right now as an SVG and load on a web page. The problem with this right now is that it would export the entire artboard. So we only want the content. We only want the word and the logo or the icon, and we don't want all that white space because all that space will be exported as part of the image. So I'm going to select what I have there, what I actually want exported. I'm going to go to Object, Artboards, and then Fit to Selected Art. That's going to shrink my artboard down to what I had selected on that page. It's pretty good, but it's not enough here. The way this was created, there is still a box. You can see around that word fork, that text box is extending down to there. So now I still have this white space at the bottom, which I don't want. So I'm going to select it all again. In this case, I'm going to go to type and create outlines. So I've just outlined the content on that artboard. And now with that still selected, object, artboard, and fit to selected art again. And now that's what I was looking for, and I've lost it. There we go. It's shrunk right down to the content that I want. Next step is quite simple. To want to save this as an SVG, file, save as, and in the box that comes up as a format, we just select the very bottom one, SVG, not the SVG compressed, just SVG is fine. And for now, I'm just going to save it beside the logo where it was. On this page, on this dialog box, I just hit OK. And let's close that. Return to my Finder. And there it is, SVG logo.svg. Next step is not mandatory. And honestly, at this point, with this logo, it's only, you can see it's only 2 kilobyte size. It's minuscule. I wouldn't even really bother, but just so you know that the service does exist, there's svgminify.com, which is an online service to basically compress SVG files if they are larger. Again, I would not do it for this file because it is very small to begin with. But if you wanted to, you just simply navigate to it and hit open. So upload file, shows the file. Hit start. This will run. Oh, it was fast that time. It's giving me this box of code. All I'm interested in this case is the file, download resulting SVG. I select that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it directly into my images folder for my website. So I'm back in the folder that's called James_read_SVG with my HTML document, and there's my images folder. So I'm going to put it right into that images folder, and I will just call fork logo. So it means something to me, and hit save. Close that. I can close that. And now when I come back to my, essentially my website file, I've got my images folder, and there's my fork logo SVG sitting in it. It's been optimized. Again, it was so small to begin with, it didn't really need to be optimized. But if you had a larger, more complex image, it might be worthwhile. Also, all I need to do now at this point is place it on my HTML page the way I would place an image or another type of image, like a JPEG or PNG. So returning to my text editor, I'm going to the line where it says placer SVG file here, not banner code, the first entry that says file. And I just start and open an image tag, source equals. It's giving me my prompts, so images, and then there's the SVG. Place a space, add like all images. It's good to have all text, fork logo, and close my image tag. Save. Come back to Chrome, refresh, and there's my logo there. The background, as you can see, is transparent because when I was in my Illustrator file, there is no white box behind it. The artboard will be exported as being transparent. So if I did want white behind it, I would have to put a white box behind it. In this case, I didn't. So it got exported with the transparent background. And because it is raster or vector art, as I zoom in, it doesn't pixelate. So that's pretty standard. That is how to create an SVG file from an Illustrator file. You're really simply just making sure it's sized appropriately on your artboard and export or save as an SVG file. Then if you want, you can upload it to the compression site to sort of make the file as small as possible. But again, if with a really basic and small file, it's not really necessary. And then we just simply place it in our HTML as we would place another image type. The second way that we can put an SVG image, let's call it, on our web pages is through the code itself. So you may remember that with vector files like Illustrator files, what the file actually is instructions to the program, be it Illustrator or in this case Chrome, on how to draw that image. So that's how it doesn't have resolution issues, because as you zoom in on that image, it just gets redrawn. So it's really just instructions. It's really just code as opposed to colored pixels. So with SVG files, we can place that code directly on our HTML page. And we'll look at that now. So for this part of the exercise, you'll create in Illustrator your own banner. The size isn't critical because the code will adapt to it, but just a general horizontal shaped banner. You can create it in Illustrator, whatever you want. You're free to create whatever you want. It doesn't have to be overly complex. I created a very basic one, but we want it to be, obviously, in Illustrator, so as a vector image. So here's one that I've created for myself. You will create your own for this part of the exercise. And when I open that, you can see I've created a very, very simple one, very graphic. I'm not a designer. One thing to note is I wanted to make sure that my background, no matter what web page it gets placed on, I want it to have a white background. So I have created a box underneath all my layers that is a white box. So when it exports, it won't be transparent. It will have a white background. And I don't have to touch my, I don't need to go through the process of object, artboard, fit, change the shape of my artboard, because all of my objects here, everything's extending beyond. The other example, my artwork was very small and the artboard was larger. In this case, my artwork, including the white box and these images here, these shapes here, are extend beyond. When I export this, I can go right to export as SVG. It's going to essentially only export what is contained within the artboard. So less steps here for me. But again, if you had a smaller one, if you've been working on a large artboard and created a small banner within it, you would have to shrink your artboard down to that as we did before. In this case, I don't need to worry about that, so I can go directly to File, Save As, and again, SVG, the last entry, and I hit Save. And here's where the process changes. Instead of hitting OK here and saving an SVG file, I'm going to go with the second option here, which says SVG code. And when I click that, a new window pops up with just a bunch of code in it. This is displaying the SVG code that would instruct a browser on how to draw that image. I select the code, copy, so edit copy, return to my HTML page within my text editing software. And now I go down to place banner or place SVG banner code here. In that div, so I'm still within the div with the ID banner. So right under that, place SVG banner code here. I simply paste what I copied. I don't like that view. I'm going to go to view word wrap. I place what I just copied from that little text window directly on my HTML page. And you can see there's some XML versioning here, but then there's an opening SVG tag, bunch of basically coordinates and instructions on how to draw that image, and then a closing SVG tag, all living within that same div. So I'm not going to touch any of this code. I'm going to save that HTML page, return to it in Chrome, hold down Shift and reload, and there's my banner. Again, this file doesn't exist. This is just being generated by the HTML code itself. And like the other SVG, I can zoom in and the instructions, it just redraws it. So there's no pixelization at any point. The image doesn't break apart. Hard to see here, but there'd be a white background. So this image got used on another page that had a colored background, it would still be white. Because I created that white background within the Illustrator file itself. So in this case, that I'm going to toggle back to here. I'll leave it here. Let's see, my SVG code starts on line 27, goes down to line 54. So less than 30 lines of code. So it's really not much. It's not much code to be placed on this HTML page. Keeps the page very fast loading with having the code itself right on the page and having it only being 30 lines of code. If the image that you create, if the banner you created was much more complicated, I mean, this only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors, I guess 6 if we want to count the white, like very limited color palette, very simple shapes. So the code that is produced to draw this image is less than 30 lines long. If you had a very complicated banner with tons of different colors and tons of small shapes, the code that it produced to render that, to redraw that in HTML can be hundreds, I mean, even thousands of lines long. In that case, it might not be appropriate to paste that into an HTML document. It would be very hard to work with. In that case, the first option of exporting it as an actual image file, a .svg image file, and loading it that way would be more appropriate. But for the purpose of this exercise, no matter how complicated the banner that you create, because again, you will be creating your own banner, and exporting this code, even if it is hundreds or thousands of lines long, that's okay. You can still place it in the same way, in the same place. You might not do that in a real world situation, but it's the requirement for this assignment is to have that fork logo placed as an image.svg, and then the banner that you create placed as a code version. That the code exported as code and placed within your HTML page using just pure code. So again, though, in the real world, depending on how complicated that banner was, you would choose which way you would want to place it, either through the image file itself or through code. The end result in both cases, which is nice, is you still have a vector image on your page that is not going to be affected by magnification, screen size, or resolution. Great if for icons and graphics that can render just as well on a huge desktop as a small phone, and without having to upload a massive image file to support that desktop, and the phone is loading this image that's far too big than it needs. So this is, for graphic files, a great solution. So again, for the purpose of this assignment only, I've got that saved. I'm going to return back to my folder. So looking into this, I've got James_read_SVG in there. In my images folder, I've got my SVG file, the CSS document, which we never touched, and the svg.html file that has that SVG code right into it, writing the banner that I created. This is this folder. Going back to the folder with my name in it, I would compress it or zip it, and then that is the folder that I or you will upload to eCentennial as your assignment. I don't need to supply any of the Illustrator files or any other files that you create, simply the sort of the website file itself. That's what you'll be uploading. Great, good luck, and I will see you soon.